So here comes the representer theorem, which is the second idea, which is useful to use kernel methods in practice. So you have seen first examples of kernel tricks that would allow you to compute a distance between points or distances between a point and a set. But we have not seen how to do proper learning, meaning really minimizing an empirical risk using kernel methods. So the representer theorem is here to do that, not only to do empirical risk minimization, but it's actually useful for more general context. But as a motivation, I introduced supervised learning, so we are going to keep this motivation. So remember that an RKHS is a space of functions. The norm in the RKHS measures the smoothness of f, and it's often used as a regularization function. And in supervised learning, I have introduced this sort of formulations where we want to explore some RKHS. We have training data xi and yi that are real value here for a regression problem, but it can be also other quantities. But here to simplify, this is simply a real value, where we want to minimize the empirical risk, where the first term measures how far f of xi is from yi, and the other term is the regularization. So this is an optimization problem in infinite dimension. And if you have taken optimization classes, even convex optimization classes, it's very likely that you did not do optimization problems in infinite dimensions. Now here, the representer theorem will simply change this optimization problem, find an equivalent problem which is infinite dimension that you can implement and that only involves pairwise comparisons, meaning kernel evaluations. So how do we do that, and why, in fact, this representer theorem, why this is a trivial statement? Before I give you the definition or the proper definition of the theorem, which is a bit abstract, I will first show you a video. Okay, so let us look at a very basic case where we have two classes of points. Okay, these circles, full circles and empty circles here, and we want to do classifications. So these circles, they live on a two-dimensional plane. And if we consider data in 2 dimensions, here it's quite easy actually to find a hyperplane that separates the data. Fine. So let us wait for a bit, and maybe we can simply also see these points as points that live in the 3-dimensional world. After all, this is what was done for this video. So these points now live in the 3-dimensional world, but they are all in the same subspace. Here, that would be a linear subspace of dimension 2 of this 3-dimensional world. So if this data live in our 3-dimensional world, to learn a linear model, it doesn't mean simply drawing a line here on this plane. It means finding a hyperplane. So what is a hyperplane? It's defined as a subspace of 2 dimensions, that a plane that will simply separate our 2 classes. So that's an example of a linear model here that lives in 3D, that discriminates between the 2 classes. Let us check. We have the full circle in one side and the empty circle on the other side. Now, as you see here exactly at this point on the video, there is not a unique hyperplane that goes through this line. So this is my INRIA badge, by the way. There is no unique hyperplane, so which one should we choose? This is a good question. And there is actually an answer to that, which is that if you think in terms of smoothness, when we look at these points that live in this 2-dimensional subspace, if you consider the linear model corresponding to this one at this specific frame, well, there is something a bit strange about it, which is that if you take an input data point and you perturb it a tiny bit on the z-axis, meaning if you allow the points to get out of its two-dimensional plane, let's say you simply add noise to it, the class can jump from one to another. And this is clearly not a good property in terms of stability of the solution. You see, this is unstable. What would be much nicer is to have this original case. Here, if I move a point here on the z-axis, it remains on the same side as the badge here. Why am I saying that? Simply because the formulation that we are going to consider and the representer theorem will simply tell us that if you have points that live in a finite dimensional subspace, then there is, at least we know in finite dimension how to learn a linear model, then there is a solution here which is pretty natural and which mathematically will be the solution of the problem. So why do I'm considering here data that lives in finite dimension, and I'm telling you that it's easy to deal with data that lives in finite dimension, but we are not interested in that because we are interested in working in some reproducing kernel Hilbert space when the number of dimensions is potentially infinite. But remember, when you have a finite set of data points, n data points, these n data points, they live in a space of at most n dimensions. Why? Because they simply live in the span of the training points. So here we are. This is the simple idea. Even if your points that are training data points are mapped to the RKHS, if you consider the span of these points in the RKHS, it defines a linear subspace of at most n dimensions, meaning, in fact, you are doing optimization in finite dimension. And the regularization principle will tell you that this is the solution that you want. Okay? Here, the dimension 3 was not infinite, but it was larger than the dimension where the data was living. The data was, in fact, living in a two-dimensional subspace. So we could solve the problem by doing an optimization problem in 2 dimensions. That's what the representer theorem is going to tell you. Let us stop the video here. And let us come back now to the definition of the representer theorem. It tells us that if you have a set X of data and a positive definite kernel to compare your data points where H is the RKHS, if you consider a finite set of points, if you have an optimization problem which consists of minimizing a function psi that were over the RKHS that depends on the evaluations between f of x1 to f of xn and the norm of f, then if your function is increasing with respect to the norm of f, strictly increasing, then the solution admits the representation of a specific form, which is a linear combination of the k of xi(x). In other words, it means that the optimal solution, a solution of the problem, in fact, we will show that it can be unique in most cases. The solution of the problem is, in fact, lives in the span of the k of x1, xn, which is simply the span which is simply the linear subspace where the training data lives. And because of this specific form, it means that we just have to find out the coefficients alpha I, so a set of n scalar values. So we are going to turn our optimization problem, which is of infinite dimension, to an optimization problem over a finite set of values, which are the coefficients alpha I. And it's easy to see that this general form of optimization problem is just a more general form of the previous one, which was the empirical risk. It's something that here grows strictly increase with the norm of f, and that only depends otherwise on the evaluations f of xi. Something to keep in mind to understand what is going on is also that, remember the reproducing property. The reproducing property tells us that this f of xi, they are nothing else than inner products between the functions kxi and F. So basically, we have a part here that is only where the relation of this part here is only characterized by inner products between F and the K of xi. So the proof of the representer theorem is simple. It uses a very basic property of Hilbert spaces, which is that when you have a linear subspace, we are going to consider this one, if you take any function from the Hilbert space, you can decompose it into a part that lives in the subspace and the part which is orthogonal to it. And what we're going to show is that the part which is orthogonal to it necessarily is equal to 0, such that the solution lives, in fact, in this linear subspace, which is the span of the data. So let us be a bit more formal. So consider now the linear subspace HS. It's the same as before. The notation is maybe a bit confusing, but it's the same as before. It's simply the span of the vectors or functions kxi. So simply the linear functions, the linear combinations of the functions kxi that have this form, that can be written as some form or as some sum of ai k of xi x for any x, and they define the linear subspace. So consider the objective function from before. Let us call it xi of f, and let us use this property of Hilbert spaces that I was mentioning, which is that there is a unique decomposition of any function f as a part fs that lives in this subspace and a part which is orthogonal to it. So the part which is orthogonal to it has an interesting property, which is, well, first, it's a point which lives also in the RKHS, so there is the reproducing property. And this part, F orthogonal, if you apply to any data point, it can be written as the inner product between F orthogonal and K of xi. And because, by definition of this part, which is orthogonal to the, it's orthogonal to the data, it's orthogonal to the space where the data lives, it is equal to 0. So it's a good news for you, because remember that in our optimization problem, we have a part that depends on the f of xi. And because f is equal to fs plus f orthogonal, it means that f of xi is equal to fs of xi, where fs is basically the projection of f on the linear subspace hs. So in other words, it simply means that the part which is f orthogonal does not influence whatsoever the values f of xi because of this orthogonality. So we have an optimization problem. If we decompose the solution into this fs plus f orthogonal, we know that f orthogonal does not influence at all a large part of the objective function, which is the one that depends on the f of xi. Now, which part depends on f orthogonal? The only part that depends on f orthogonal is simply the norm of f. And here we use a very famous theorem. I hope that you know something about it, which tells us that the square norm of f is simply the sum of the square norm of these two parts that are orthogonal to each other, fs and f orthogonal. So in other words, we have an objective function. One part of it does not depend on this quantity. The other part depends on this quantity here, but we know that we want to minimize the norm because the objective function is strictly increasing with the norm. As a consequence, if you want to minimize your objective function, you have this part to be equal to 0. And at the same time, you get some intuition why we get a function which is a bit smoother than before. Remember the small video that I showed you with my badge? At some point, it was not orthogonal to the plane where the data was living, and I was telling you this gives you a function which is pretty unstable, because if you move a bit along the z-axis, you are going to change drastically the value of the objective, the value of your prediction function. So then at the end, this is quite a trivial statement. If you have data, a finite set of data, even if you are dealing with some RKHS, the data lives in a finite dimensional subspace, which is the span of the data in the RKHS. After you do that, simply you remember that you decompose the solution as a part that lives in this finite dimensional subspace, a part which is orthogonal to it, and the part which is orthogonal to it can only harm you in terms of objective function value because of this relation here. And at the end, the theorem is proven. So this is something very simple, but the consequences are large because we are going to see lots of formulations of this form, where we have a regularization function that uses the norm in the RKHS, typically that increases with the norm of the RKHS, and a part that only depends on the predictions f of x1 to f of xn. So in theory, this is nice because the minimization enforces the norm of f to be small, such that there is a regularization effect. And in practice, we also know that we can now use the representer theorem. What does it mean in practice? In practice, it means that we can look for solutions that have a specific form, which are functions that live in the span of the data, that can be written as some sum of alpha I, k of xi x. And you are going to look for the scalar values of alpha I. So basically, you are going to look for a vector alpha in Rn that parameterizes your solution, f of x. So there are a few notations that are useful that I'm going to use many times in the future lectures. One of them is that if you consider a data point xj that is in the training data, f of xj, this can be written as the sum of the alpha I, k of xi xj. This is simply the entry j of the matrix vector multiplication k times alpha. Good news, the notations will be greatly simplified. The other good news is that the square norm of f, which is simply this sum of alpha I kxi, I mean the square norm of it. As always, you have a square norm, you write it as an inner product, then you use the bilinearity of the inner product, you will simply obtain a double sum of alpha I, alpha j, with inner products between k of xi, k of xj, which are nothing else than kernel evaluations. And this double sum, you can simplify it as a vector matrix vector multiplication between alpha, alpha transpose, k times alpha. So this is nice. You are going to see lots of formulations that can be written as these quantities here, and we are going to be done. In general, what we do is that we have an optimization problem of this form, which is in infinite dimension. We don't like it because infinite dimension, it's complicated. We notice that we can apply the representer theorem. We parameterize the solution with this vector alpha, and our objective function becomes the minimization of this function psi that depends, I should also simply write it, that depends on k times alpha and on this quantity alpha times k times alpha. And for that, you can now apply everything you have seen in optimization classes. We'll see many examples anyway. And this will not stop yet for the day. A last thing I want to say is that there are also complementary interpretations of all of these kernel methods. There is this geometric interpretation in the feature space because of the kernel trick, that even when the feature space is large, most kernel methods, they actually work in the linear span of the embeddings of the points. And the functional interpretation is simply C, the optimization problem over the RKHS associated to the kernel. These are two complementary views. Just a reminder that, I mean, the representer theorem has important consequences, but it is rather trivial. Simply, you decompose F as a part which is orthogonal and the part that lives with the data, and the part which is orthogonal is useless to explain the training data. That's it. And there is nothing else to say. So that will stop the lecture for today. And next time, we'll talk about supervised learning in more detail.